Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing my review for Golden Sun, which is book 2 in the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown. I did a review for book 1, Red Rising, a few months back. I will link that one in the info cards above and also in the description down below, so you may want to check that one out before you watch this one. So for this video specifically, I will be doing a spoiler-free section at the start, and then I will go into more spoilery thoughts later on. I think there's enough to talk about here spoiler-free, especially in comparison with book 1, that I think it's a good idea to do a good chunk spoiler-free here. There will be timestamps in the description for those two sections, depending on what you want to watch. And I will give you a warning when I go into spoilers, so don't worry about that. Alright, let's get right into it. So Golden Sun, it's book 2 of Red Rising, as I said. In my Red Rising review, I talked a lot about that I enjoyed the story, but I didn't think that it was anything that really stood out. I didn't think it did anything in an extraordinarily well way, where I thought that it would be an all-time favorite or anything. With Golden Sun, I think Pierce Brown improves the story in every aspect. I think the plot work is a lot better. I think the pacing is it's still really fast-paced, but it is also a lot more consistent, and it feels like the story flows a lot better than in book 1, where I had some issues in the middle part of the book with how it was paced. I don't think it was ever paced slowly. I just didn't quite like how the book was written in the middle part for book 1. Here I didn't have any of those issues. I like the character work, especially for the side characters in this one. I think the relationship work especially is great in this. I think the plot is well done throughout. I think it is quite intricate how it is plotted out. I do think there are certain things that are convenient, not in a way that they wouldn't happen the way they happen, but they are convenient in the way they are told. Because I think the way that this book is written, it's written in a first-person narrative, and we are in the head of the main character. And there are certain twists that we find out after the character does something that technically I think we should know beforehand. So basically it's about something that the character knows and that he's about to use in an upcoming scene, but we don't know about it. A particular aspect of that character's thoughts is just kept secret from the reader, which I personally think is an issue with the way it is written in this book. I think the way it's written, it feels like we are in the character's head, but in certain moments it feels like, okay, we don't know a really big and important part of what the character has done and what he's thinking. So I think that's somewhat of an issue. I think in this book, this is only an issue in one particular moment. I don't think it happens as much as in book 1, but it does still happen, I think, and that's actually my only major complaint about this book. The other thing is, I think the main character still could use a lot more work and a lot more depth. I think he is written a lot better in this one than in book 1, and I think he's really growing into a really good character in this one. But I think really what shines in this story is more his relationships with the whole side cast. So yeah, I think the character work overall is better than in book 1. I just don't think it's quite as good as it could be, but it's clear that the author is getting better at that particular aspect. What I also like is how he expands the world. So basically in book 1 we really focus on a very specific part of the solar system. We focus only on Mars and just on this one place on Mars. And in this one, it really grows and we really see more of the solar system. We see more planets. We really do a lot of space travel there. This really feels more like a space opera. And yeah, it doesn't feel Hunger Gamesy at all, like the book 1 can feel at times. So yeah, that's good in my book, because I feel like the way that this book is written, it feels a lot more like a political drama in space, more so than, yeah, something like a dystopian war games type of situation. All in all, I think the way this book builds on book 1 is done really well. I think the focus of the story shifts well enough to new and more interesting things that I feel like it's done incredibly well. I think the plot is really intricate. I think the character work and especially the relationship work in this one is done so well and a lot better than in the first book. I was really surprised at how much I really ended up liking this. So I knew I would like it better than book 1, because everything I had heard, everybody would say that Book 2 is a lot better than book 1, and I was expecting to like it more. I was not expecting to like it this much because I've thought about this for a while now. It's been a while since I finished this book, and I think this book is actually close to being my favorite book that isn't in the A Song of Ice and Fire series so far. So yeah, I like this book a lot. I think even if you think about it afterwards, there are a lot of things in this book that are done well, and I think especially when you read book 1, you don't really get a feeling for what this author will be able to do in the next book. So yeah, I'm impressed at how Pierce Brown developed his story and how he develops his characters, and especially at how he writes this plot, where even though he's doing it very fast paced, it doesn't feel like any of the plot threads are cheap or are unearned. And I think that's really something that he thrives in this book. What I also really like is when he writes moments that are not so plot focused but more character focused. I think there are a few scenes in this book where we really get one-on-ones between characters that I think he writes really well, and I think he writes them so well that I'm a bit sad that we don't get more of that. I think this book really thrives on its fast pace, but I think that's a downside of it, that when we get these down moments, we don't get a lot of them, and they aren't really long. But Pierce Brown is really good at writing those down moments. So it's kind of a trade-off, I think, whether you want to keep the pace up or whether you want to give us more time to breathe with the characters. And I think Pierce Brown writes the one-on-one character moments so well that I feel like I want more of that in the upcoming entries. I think in total, maybe the book could have used like 50 more pages to give us more breathing time in certain scenes, and maybe, yeah, just to give us more character work, even more character work, and not as much of the fast-paced plot. But I think the fact that this is so fast-paced and the plot is so good really makes the book stand out. So I'm a bit torn whether how I would have done this or how I would have liked Pierce Brown to do this. But I think he does a good job at both of these things. I think he chose to go a bit more with the fast-paced plot over the one-on-one moments, which I think he could have made the other choice and maybe the book would have been better. I don't know, but that's just my feeling because I think he writes those moments so well. So yeah, all in all, as I said, I think this is one of my favorite non-A Song of Ice and Fire books. I think this is a highly recommended book. I know that book 1 is something that a lot of people don't like a lot. I still enjoyed it. I had my issues with it, as I talked about in my review, so I get why people wouldn't be the biggest fans of this, but I would implore anybody who has read book 1 to at least give book 2 a try, because I think book 2, it is done really well, and I think if you were sold this in a way that it's a sci-fi space opera series, maybe this book is really what you will be looking for more than book 1. Yeah, that's all I think I can say about spoiler-free without going into too much details. I think the series is going in a really interesting way. I've already started book 3, and I'm enjoying book 3 as much as I enjoyed book 2, so yeah, I would implore you, if you have read book 1, read book 2 and let me know how you feel about it. But yeah, that's all for spoiler free. I will be going into spoilers in the next section, so if you haven't read Golden Sun, you should read it, and you should probably tune out right now. I like this life, no matter my reluctances to play the gold, no matter the sorrowful excuses I make. Part of me is like them. Perhaps I was born to be of 2 colors. Slag that. Man wasn't born to be any color. Our rulers decided to relegate us to colors. And they were wrong. For 700 years my people have been enslaved without voice, without hope. Now I am their sword, and I do not forgive. I do not forget. So let him lead me onto his shuttle. Let him think he owns me. Let him welcome me into his house, so I might burn it down. As I said in the spoiler-free section, I enjoy this book a lot. There's a lot that happens in this where I feel like it's done so well that I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this. So I will say, the way this book starts, I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit worried, because we get this like scene in the academy where Darrow is learning to become the space commander. I think Praetor is the word. So I was thinking like, okay, hopefully we don't get another school setting in this book, because I felt like He did the school setting fairly well. I think I had some issues with it in book 1, but I wasn't happy about getting another different school setting in book 2. So I was happy that that was done in like 1 or 2 chapters, because I think everything that he develops after that is incredible. I think the whole story between Darrow and Nero and the Bellona, and how he's trying to stir up this civil war in the Golds, is really an interesting aspect. And I think it's an interesting way how Pierce Brown writes this story. I really enjoyed the political intrigue between the sovereign on Luna, and then I like this power struggle between the Bellona house and the Augustus house. I really like what role Darrow plays in this, and it's really interesting to see how Darrow really fits into this gold society. I like how Pierce Brown writes Darrow's character here, because I feel like he shows us this guy, if he wasn't born a red, he could be a really dangerous and really high-level gold that could really do some damage. And I think there's a section in this book where Darrow is thinking about, what if he were born a gold and Cassius was born a red, and they were in opposite positions? Would Cassius be a better person than he is now? And I think that was something that really made me think, that I feel like, yeah, if Darrow wasn't born a red, if he was really born into this position where he would be born a gold, and he had this like background as a peerless guard, I think there is this like, I did have these thoughts that, yeah, probably he would be somebody who would really do quite some damage in the universe. I really enjoyed that aspect. I think Darrow has really some interesting inner monologues in this book that I think are really well written. As I mentioned in the spoiler-free section, I really enjoyed Darrow's relationships with all the side characters, especially his relationship with Severo. I think was done so well. I think the scene where Severo finds out about Darrow being a red, or where he confronts Darrow about being a red, I think it's written so well. And I think this whole like thing that he talks about how Darrow always could trust Severo, but he needs to give the trust back and trust him. And I think that moment they had where Darrow finally could be open with Severo was so well written. I think the friendship between those two is done so well in this book. I think it was developed fairly well in book 1 already, but in book 2 I feel like it hits another emotional level for me. In a similar way, I really liked what Pierce Brown did with the relationship between Darrow and Ragnar. Ragnar has quickly become one of my favorite characters. There is so much interesting potential with Ragnar as a character. We really see how screwed up the system is that the Golds implemented with the Obsidians, that the Obsidians really, they are these killer machines. They're genetically engineered to kill, but still they fear the Golds. Ragnar is such an impressive fighter, but then when it comes to not obeying a Gold, he really has this mindset that that's just something that isn't in his worldview. For him, it's clear that he has to obey Golds, despite the fact that he is really this fighting machine. And I feel like that whole dynamic between Darrow and Ragnar, and how Darrow really tries to empower Ragnar and shows him, look, this isn't how this world is supposed to work. These people aren't gods. They're manipulating you, and they're manipulating your people. And then he tells Ragnar that he is a red. I think this trust that Darrow really puts into not just Ragnar, but also into other low-color people is really done so well. And I think Darrow really grows as a leader and as a personality in this book quite a bit. So I think that particular relationship is done also incredibly well. And yeah, I hope Ragnar has a big role in the next few books, because I think Ragnar is one of my favorite characters in this series already. Then I really also enjoyed Darrow's relationship with Rock. Alright, one thing. The way this book ends, obviously, it's quite well known. If you've read this book, the way it ends, it's crazy. For me personally, I love that scene, but it didn't quite hit me as much because I wasn't spoiled for that scene. But whenever I hear people talk about this book, they always talk about how amazing this ending chapter of the book is. And I've heard the obvious parallels to the Red Wedding in A Song of Ice and Fire, so I was already expecting something really messed up at the end of the book. I think if I hadn't known that scene was so hyped up, I probably would have enjoyed it more, because in the last chapter I was finding myself, I was just waiting for something to happen, and I was trying to just figure out what is going to happen. So even though I wasn't spoiled, I think just the fact that I knew something major was coming up kind of hampered the experience a little bit. I don't think it made the experience bad at any point or anything like that. I still really enjoyed that chapter. I just feel like if I hadn't known, it would have been a really, really surprising moment. And it would have hit me maybe more emotionally, because the way I was reading it in this situation was like I was waiting for something to happen, and I was shocked when it was actually Rock who turned on Darrow. But in the end, I was like, okay, I was thinking, okay, basically the three major losses we had are Lorne, Fitchner, and Nero, and I felt like that was more of a... Those characters were important, but I feel like it was clear that those characters wouldn't be the main focus in the next part, so it didn't hit me as much, even though I liked those characters, especially Lorne and Fitchner are really interesting characters that I really liked, and Nero, I think, added an interesting dimension to the story that obviously these characters will be missed, and I was surprised. I wouldn't say I was happy that they were killed, but it wasn't like the major characters. Like, I think the major characters would be Darrow, Mustang, Victra, Severo, Ragnar. If none of those died, so I wasn't like amazed on that level like a Red Wedding, but I still think that moment was done very well. Sorry, I was talking about Rock actually. So Rock and Darrow's relationship in this book is done really well, I think. There are these small hints that really build up this betrayal by Rock towards the end of the book. I think that was developed fairly well, and I was still surprised that it was Rock who actually ended up betraying Darrow. So I think every conversation between them had this like really nice friendship tone to it, but it also felt like Darrow never trusted Rock. So I think it felt like, it was kind of inevitable that Rock would turn on Darrow, and I still didn't feel like that was in Rock's character, but I feel like especially the moment that Quinn dies is something that probably changed how Rock feels about Darrow and everything, and then probably when he finds out about Darrow being a Red, I imagine that I would have loved to actually see the moment where Rock finds out about Darrow. I think Rock and Darrow was written really well, and it did build this like tension between them where it felt like, okay, if you have a friend who you really expect to trust you and you don't give trust back, I think that's something that was really explored well, and I think you can kind of understand why Rock would kind of turn on Darrow, although the way he does it in the end is really reprehensible. And then I think Darrow's relationships with Victra was also done really well. I think Victra is a really interesting character. I don't quite like her as much as a few of the other characters yet. I've heard that she is some people's favorite character in the series. I think she was written quite well. I think her dynamic with Darrow is quite interesting too, and I think her whole identity thing with people judging her based on who her family is, who her sister is, I think that was a really interesting aspect to her character. I think there will be more exploration of her character in the upcoming book, so I'm looking forward to that. But for now, I liked how she was written as a character, and how her relationship with Darrow especially was written, and I also like in the end when all of them were shot, she wanted to make sure that Darrow knew that she didn't betray him, and I think that was a really interesting twist, or a really interesting aspect of what was done there. I think really I like Victra towards the end of the story quite a bit, and I hope to see more from her into the upcoming books. And then we have the relationship between Darrow and Mustang, which I thought was done quite well again here. I like that Pierce Brown kept them apart at the beginning of the story, and then kind of gave us more background on what happened between them, between book 1 and book 2. I really liked how Pierce Brown decided to reveal Darrow's secret to Mustang, because I feel like it really shows this flaw in Darrow as a character, that despite the fact that he loves Mustang, or at least I think he loves Mustang, he can't bring himself to tell her herself that he is a Red. The way I interpret it is that he just can't deal with how she would react. I think he just doesn't want to feel like she wouldn't accept him, and that's why he decides to tell her the way he tells her. It feels kind of cowardly the way he does it, but it also feels quite realistic the way he does it, because it's something that I feel like if she doesn't accept him, I think it's something that would really crush a big like part of his motivation of what he is doing. That's something that I think was explored really well, because I think it was done in a subtle enough way and it was mysterious enough that you didn't really get this. I was sad that they didn't have this like conversation one-on-one, because I feel like if he would have explained it himself, she may have been more open to it. But I still weirdly enjoyed how it was done. And I like how he kept that part open-ended towards the end, even where Mustang has the chance to kill Darrow and basically end this rebellion, but she decides not to, but she doesn't decide to join him or to support him. But yeah, it's, I think, a very human reaction to it, because I feel like, so the way I describe it is Darrow is kind of breaking her worldview, and obviously it's hard for her to deal with it immediately. I think that was done fairly well. I think the questions that she poses of Darrow and what would happen after the rebellion are also really interesting and are probably going to be explored in the next few books. So I think that's done incredibly well. I like their dynamic. I don't think Mustang is the most complex or the best character in this, but I think Darrow and Mustang's relationship really is something that I like. What I also liked in parallel to that scene where he tells Mustang is his reunion with his mother. And I think that scene really, I was close to tears when he reunites with his mother. That scene is written so well. I really enjoyed the parallels that we get, that Darrow is simultaneously breaking the worldview, not just of Mustang, but also of his mother, that he really tells his mother about his plans, about this rebellion, and she also, like, she supports him, but she also can't fathom what would happen if he breaks this world and this hierarchy they have down, and what would come after this rebellion. So I think it's an interesting way that Pierce Brown developed this. I think he poses questions of his protagonist and also of this whole rebellion that he's built up that I feel like will be answered in the next few books. I think those are really the natural questions that arise. Okay, yeah, people are being suppressed by the current system, and now you are starting a rebellion, and that you may have good intentions, but there is this question, what if you succeed? How will you replace the current hierarchy? What will happen afterwards? Because the way the Golds have structured the world, every single color is perfectly suited or perfectly engineered to do the tasks they're doing. So it's hard for these people to really fathom a different world. I think the way this book deals with these dynamics and these issues is done really well, and I think there are really interesting questions that are posed of Darrow now that he gets back into the rebellion, and now that he is in open rebellion, it feels like those questions are really something that he will have to deal with, that him and the Sons of Ares in general will have to kind of address while trying to break this system down. So I think that was done incredibly well. I really enjoyed that aspect. So what I mentioned in the spoiler-free review with the plot conveniences that I didn't like as much, or the POV breaks, the scene I had in mind was the fight between Darrow and Cassius. I have been waiting for that fight for a while. I thought that we would get a Cassius versus Darrow fight towards the end of book 1, and then we don't get that. We get this like fight in book 2 that I think had a lot of potential, and I think it works kind of well, and I think the way Cassius is written is fine. What I don't like is that we are led to believe that Darrow can't use this razor weapon and that Cassius would beat him, and then during the fight we find out that Darrow has been studying under Lorne for 2 years, and I was like, what? Why do we not know this? And I feel like that's something where I was like, okay, we are in the character's head, he's telling us this from the first person POV, and he's telling this to us in present tense as if it's happening right now, and we don't get access to the fact that, and we get so much background on what he did in those 2 years, but we don't get that particular aspect of it. And it feels like the only reason that was written that way is because it seemed like the author just wanted to have this plot twist for sure in the book, and that's what feels like he decided, okay, I can't tell the readers that Darrow has been training with Lorne, so I'm not going to, for no other reason just than to have this plot twist during the fight. I don't think it's something that's incredibly bad, but it's something that annoys me a little bit, because I feel like if I'm in Darrow's head, I really want to be in his head and I want to get his inner thoughts, and I don't want to feel like he's tricking me or he's kind of waiting to tell me information to have a twist. It's a weird thing that he does in this one. I think it happens a few times in book 1 as well. It doesn't happen as often, I think, in book 2. I think that's the biggest case of this. So yeah, I don't think it's bad by any means, but I think it could have been handled better. I hope we get more of those two characters in the next book, because I feel like there is more to explore between them. I think their relationship in book 1 was done really well. I wouldn't say Pierce Brown dropped the ball on it, but I feel like there was a lot more potential in that dynamic to be explored, and I'm a bit underwhelmed by that particular thing, because I think there's a lot more to do with those two characters. There is probably something Pierce Brown is planning for the next book. As for the fight, for this particular reason, the way it was done, the way Darrow's training was revealed to us, I just wasn't a big fan of that. That was a major complaint I had about this book. I don't think there's anything else I would say is particularly bad. I think there is more potential to be had by going into Darrow's thoughts, by making him a more complex character. I think there's a lot of emotional stakes with him that can be explored in a way better way. I think Pierce Brown shows in this book that he has talent to write characters, and I think especially he does a great job at building different characters, these side characters, through Darrow's point of view. But I think there's a lot more potential for Darrow himself to grow as a character, and for us to maybe experience more of an examination of his character, because I think Darrow is actually in a really interesting position, and I think there's probably a lot you can do with his character, but I feel like that doesn't seem like it's too much of the focus of the book. And again, that's probably something that might be a conscious choice, that Brown is really, I think he's telling a more fast-paced, plot-focused story. There's another interesting, more personal story about Darrow in here, and I feel like book 3, given how this book ends and where Darrow ends in this book, I think there's a lot of potential in book 3 that we will get that. So yeah, I won't hold it against the book quite as much, but that's what's holding it back from being among my top favorites, which is The Song of Ice and Fire, as everybody knows. But yeah, I think that's where I really think it is a step below it. Another thing I'm a bit torn about is I'm not sure if this story would work better if it was a multi-POV story. I am aware that the second trilogy in this world or in this series is a multi-POV story, and sometimes I feel like that the fact that this is a single POV story really makes the book flow better, because it really ends up being a page turner, because it feels like, okay, we have these short chapters and you really want to find out what's happening with Darrow. But I feel like, given how big this universe is and given how many interesting discussions and how many interesting stories I guess other characters probably have, I can't help but think that maybe having a few different POVs would add a lot to the story, that would really add to the complexity of it, and it would really show us a lot of the different colors in this universe. I think Brown tries to really show us more of the colors in this book than he did in the last, but I feel like you can only do that much with a single POV. You can't really go through, I don't know, I think there's like 14 different colors casts in this universe, so he can't really go through each one of them specifically. I think he tries to do his job with showing us a few different colors. I can't help but feel like it might work even better if we had another POV. Obviously that would then maybe increase the page length, that would maybe hamper the pacing of the story, so it's hard to say, but all I will say is I'm looking forward to see what happens in the second trilogy, because I really want to see more perspectives on this world. There's a lot to be talked about, the political intrigue in this book, which I think Pierce Brown does really well. I like how he writes the Sovereign. I like how he decides to involve Darrow and our other side characters into this whole political landscape of this universe is really interesting and really well done. I do have a bit of an issue with how all these characters that we saw in book one end up in quite important positions in this book, because we see Mustang is really close to the Sovereign. We see Cassius has become an Olympic Knight. We see Fitchner has become an Olympic Knight. Though that one I was a bit annoyed by, but I feel like obviously with the revelation that Fitchner is Ares, I think it kind of explains that he was trying to get close to the Sovereign. So I think that one I can kind of excuse given that, but I feel like the fact that so many of our main characters from the first book end up being in so important positions by this book is a bit weird, I guess, or it felt a bit easy. And obviously that's something that will come with having this 2-year time gap between book one and book two. So yeah, I don't think it's a big issue, but it's something that I feel like could be explained more, and it could be explored more, I guess, to see like how does Cassius end up becoming an Olympic Knight? How do all of these people we saw in the Institute, how they get so close to Nero? How do they stay together? How does Fitchner become an Olympic Knight? There's a lot of things that you can explore here. It's hard to say that's a flaw of the book, because I think Brown is trying to tell a really concise story that doesn't feel bloated, but I feel like there are certain elements that really spark my interest that I feel like I wish would be explored more, but I understand why maybe the author doesn't want to explore them, or maybe he doesn't want to fill the book with all these different stories from all these different characters. So yeah, it's a bit of a hard thing for me to judge. I don't know if these books would be better if you wrote those things into them, or if the story works better the way it is. So yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about, and I'm not sure if I would like it better, because I think the way this book is, it's already so good that it's hard to say that if you change something or add something that it would make it better. Because I'm sure that Brown, while he was writing this book, probably was thinking about these things and probably made these decisions for some specific purpose. But yeah, these are things that I would be interested in, and I wouldn't actually mind if we get some different short stories or novellas, or some stories about these other people in this world. Because I think Darrow, yes, he is interesting. There's a lot of potential with him as a character, but I think these other characters and these other stories could be really interesting to read as well. Yeah, I was talking about the political intrigue. I think the way the Sovereign, I think the way Aja Lysander was an interesting plot device, I will call him. He's not really a character yet. So I think there were certain aspects of the story that were done really well. I think the reveal of Fitchner being Ares was done so well, and it was something that I wasn't expecting. Though I guess in hindsight you can see why it's a bit obvious, given his role in book one, and if you compare it with other similar stories, I guess you can probably see, okay, yeah, Fitchner is probably somebody who a lot of people predicted to be Ares, or at least part of the Sons of Ares. But personally, for me, it was a big surprise. So I didn't mind that. I didn't mind that twist. I was quite surprised by it, and I enjoyed the way it was done, and I enjoyed how that particular reveal really played into Darrow and Severo's relationship. I think overall the politics in the series was written very well. I think the scheming and the way this political intrigue is done is very good. I think the way this book ends with the Sovereign and the Jackal turning on Darrow, I don't think the Sovereign turns on Darrow, but the Jackal and Rock, they really end up betraying Darrow, and it really shows that Darrow is an interesting character, because while he is our main character, I do think he has a lot of character flaws. I think he underestimates a lot of people. I think he feels a bit too arrogant at times. I do think he feels a bit insecure as well. I think there's a lot of character flaws that are interesting with him. I think the way he underestimates the Jackal, I think the way he underestimates Rock, I think, the way he tries to politically maneuver all of these big players in this universe, and how that ends up turning around on him by the end of the book is done so well. And I personally think that there was enough setup for that particular twist throughout the book, but I personally think if I hadn't known that something like that was coming, I could never have predicted it. So it's really something that I personally think is plotted out really well. Overall, I think this book is great. I could talk about this for a long time, so I think I will cut it short here. Let me know how you like this book, if you like Golden Sun, if you don't like it, even talk with me in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm enjoying this series quite a bit. I was surprised how much more I liked Golden Sun compared to Red Rising, so yeah, I'm happy with where this series is going. I like the things that Brown is focusing on, and I think there is a lot of potential for this story to become one of my favorite series. I would highly recommend everyone to read it. If you liked it, leave a like, leave a subscribe, talk with me in the comments down below. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.